But I do want to touch on something that Tom brought up, and I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. If Tom were in Ottawa and he saw hundreds of military guys approaching him with heavy-duty ordnance, he'd be thinking, I know exactly what they're going to do. I know their maneuver because that's my thing. I've done that. You know, it's a military operation. So when I was there, I'm one of the few people that's witnessing this from the police perspective. And I'm saying, I know exactly what's going on because I was a member of the emergency response team, which has multiple roles, and one of them is crowd management. That's a fancy term for crowd control. So when I watch the maneuvering, I know exactly where they're going, what they're going to do, how they're operating, and what the intention is. What really threw me for a curve was when I saw the real heavy-handedness with the ordnance that they had and how they deployed that ordnance. I knew where that came from. That's coming from a briefing, because I've been involved in pre-briefings that set the stage, they set the tone for what you're going to encounter. So when you go in heavy, it's because you've been briefed that way. You've been told a story. And to this day, I don't know what the story is, but I know the story is completely false. Because having been there for so long, the people hadn't changed, the vibe and the atmosphere hadn't changed. It was the police approach that had changed, and the police personnel that had been changed out. Obviously, you know, they weren't there to see it. Completely new crew, new strategy, and they came in heavier than anything I had seen in my career. And I knew immediately this was false intelligence. And that's not something that's been covered at all yet. It never really came out in any aspect yet. There was never really that opportunity where they got deep into who the commanding officer was on site and what was the nature of the briefing. And clearly they would have to explain that based on all the video footage of the deployment of flashbangs, tear gas, all the different ordnance that was deployed, used, and possessed, and how the firearms were pointed. I mean, you don't deploy with long guns into a crowd and then start pointing them at people. You know, it's like wrong, wrong, wrong. This is not part of how we operate, or they operate. And it's still not part of how they operate, unless they were briefed a certain way. And I'm convinced that that was false intelligence. And I'd really love to know and get to the bottom of that. So now we'll shift and lead from there to our civil suit. And the civil suit that we're engaged in really primarily deals with the freezing of the bank accounts. The Mosley decision is not really tied to the necessity of the civil suit. The civil suit can be used as a, hey listen, you really inconvenienced me. You caused me some hardship because you took away my access to my funds. So it doesn't go very far in terms of reach for, I want to sue you because of that. But the Mosley decision, dealing with actually what you did was unlawful, and on these multiple levels, it's a violation of these rights. That puts the civil suit from, you know, this low category into this extremely high category of a responsibility, or the lack thereof. And we don't do it for ourselves. We do it for all Canadians. You know, back at the time, and it's not vindication to say, yeah, we really want to go after these guys. It's more so, we're all victims, and we just want the abuse to stop. And how do you do it? So criminally, I've been keeping track of all of the evidence associated to who was responsible, how they're responsible, and what those components of the evidence are or look like to hold people accountable. And there's an overabundance of it, and there's no shortage of the number of people involved. But the Attorney General's office, the courts, the police are not going to cooperate. So when that happens, we know we really have a problem with the rule of law. And the rule of law, and it's no longer existing, you know, the fact that it's just not there anymore, is visible on the municipal level, within your own councils. It's visible within the provincial level, the federal level, and that's just the political side. Then the regulatory agencies, the courts. We see that we not only have two sets of rules, but we no longer have an operational system that's working for us. You know, it's been said that the status quo, the go-to for civilization, for humanity, is really the rule of the jungle. We can be very wild, we can be very violent, we can be very aggressive with one another. And the only thing that keeps us civil is a set of guide rails, is a set of rules that we all agree to operate under. And I remember when I was being interviewed by the Attorney General's Council a few months after the Freedom Convoy, when we had launched this Mosley, it wasn't called the Mosley decision, it was called the Judicial Review of the Emergency Measures Act. And so the Attorney General was involved, the Federal Attorney General. And when I was being cross-examined, and I really looked forward to that, and it was a glorious time because, you know, it's for such a time as this that you think, I've testified as an expert witness in court hundreds and hundreds of times for my forensic investigation, and I'm always up against lawyers and engineers who want to debate my evidence. And as long as you provide evidence, factual information, it's so easy to present. Just tell the truth. It's really easy. So you're being cross-examined, and it was very relaxing because you just had to tell the truth. You just stick to your guns on what was true. And so the one question that I found shocking, but I handled it very calmly, was there was a press release that we had done, I believe it was on the first day of the Emergency Measures Act, when myself, Eddie, and Daniel Bolford sat at a table in the boardroom of a hotel, and in front of us were the CBC, CTV, Global, and a few other mainstream news outlets right in front of us. And it was the first national press release that we were going to do, because we wouldn't deal with the media before that. But we knew that if we do a press release, they're not going to air it anyways. But we'll do it to prove a point. And the point was that they're not going to air it. That's the point. We want to prove that. So while they're right up in the front, you know, they got the front space, they were completely surrounded with independent media, filming them, filming us, and capturing the whole press release. And did that whole story air? No. There's just a little snippet, and if you saw it, it would have been from an independent news source, not from the CBC.
I don't have cable.
So when I was being interviewed, they asked me, you know, what do you think gives you the right to put out that information? And I was kind of like, what information? What are you talking about? Well, let's show you the video. So of course they get a copy of the independent news copy. And you know, now it's important to show you what you said, even though it was never fully aired by mainstream media. And so they showed a video clip of us right there at the front table, and what we said, and what I said. And they took real exception to the fact that I said, I looked in the camera, and I said, we're calling upon all Canadians to come to this peaceful protest and to support us in this peaceful endeavor. You know, the Emergency Act was just invoked. What gave you that permission? And I just said, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Not a word. They just said, it's like they hadn't thought of that. You know, they hadn't thought of that. It's like, oh, that's the answer. Like, is that wrong? I thought we had the right to peacefully protest. And the point I was trying to make was, and I said this when they tried to argue, I said, I was under the impression that we have a social fabric. And I'm starting to see that that social fabric has been torn because we're holding up to our part of the bargain. And I don't see anything illegal in what it is we're doing. So I don't understand. If you can explain it to me, what are you talking about? Why would I need authority to do that? You've taken away all of our rights. You know, and they didn't have an answer for that. So it went very smoothly. It went very smoothly. So I think what bothers me the most is in a career of 32 years of policing, when you're bound by all the rules and regulations, and you would know that there's really no excuse as a police officer when you break the law. It's really hard to say, well, I made a mistake, I didn't know. No, the public expects that you would know what you're doing when you're breaking the law. But that's not enough. There's a whole other set of rules that we're governed by, and we have to abide by all of those rules as well. It's called the Police Services Act. And you know that if you do something wrong, there's consequences for that. And what really bothers you is that you know there's a lot of consequences for doing what's right. They're going to come after you if you do what you know is right. So just shut up, be quiet, sit in the corner, and be a good person, and don't ask questions. Don't go to protests. Just stay home and just shut up. And you know that's wrong. And so you know that doing what's right is going to have consequences. And that's troubling in this country. So if you understand the weave of the social fabric, you would think that I'm going to do what I know to be right. And yet, the attack from media and the attack from law enforcement and from government puts you in this surreal world of, I just know what I'm doing is right. So to get to this civil suit, I can't speak for Eddie, but I'm sure the same applies to him, and I'm sure the same applies to all of our plaintiffs. We just never thought twice about the consequences or repercussions of the costs associated in signing contracts and getting involved in this major epic historical suit. It was just, is it the right thing to do? Yep. So you're going to do it? Yep. We'll do it. It's the right thing to do. So it's been quite a ride. And in our particular suit, I know Tom is involved in a similar suit. His suit may have a narrower scope of reach. In our case, we have 30 defendants that we're after. We're after all the banks associated to our members, our plaintiffs, the Ottawa Police Service Board, the Ottawa Police Service, a number of key players with the RCMP, and a number of cabinet ministers. So that's a very broad spectrum reach in a civil suit that takes a lot of paperwork. It takes a lot of investigative prowess to put it all together. And it's not that the information and the evidence is not there. The evidence is there. As a matter of fact, there will be much more evidence forthcoming as the process proceeds. But just like the bandwidth in your internet cable, you know what that means, the scope and bandwidth of this suit is very dependent on cash. It's very dependent on money and funding that broad scope of the investigation. So we have had people reach out that have been very helpful and supportive. And so I just want to say that it really, a big component of that is very dependent on the continued support from the public, and we're very thankful of that. But ultimately, where this ends up will be conducive to the totality of the support that we put in, both personally and from other members of the community. So I thank those who have assisted in this cause. I can say that on May the 10th, Harold Jonkers in Caister Centre They will be holding a morning breakfast on that Saturday morning, fundraiser, I don't know if you've been to the one that happened last year in the fall, but there'll be one for this particular suit. And we're hoping you can join us there. And we're hoping that my ask to you is to support these types of endeavors and to try to network and arrange with people that you know across Ontario, Niagara, and other provinces to say, hey, this is what's going on. Can you host a fundraiser in your area? We'll be glad to go there. We'll be glad to speak on these issues, and so on and so forth. And lastly, just before I go, I just want to say, I have not read Tom's book, but I've had an opportunity to preview it. I have read Ray's book, and I can say I'm very impressed with what I've read so far in Tom's book. I have read the totality of Ray's book. Highly recommend both of these books. And I can't understand why you wouldn't take the opportunity, maybe collectively as a group, to purchase a number of these books and try to weasel your way into the local public libraries or the school boards and say, this is Canadian content, this is historical significance. Now, ideally, if you have a black friend or an Asian friend or a native friend that can go in, you know, white people don't have as much clout anymore, so maybe you can get one of your other designees, or if you know someone who's on our side who has one of those rainbow things and blue hair, maybe they can be a help, right? But seriously, consider doing that. These are fantastic books. All right, any questions before I go? Yeah? So no, the judicial review portion, there's two separate tracks. So one is the judicial review, and there's a number of legal teams that are jumping on board, including ours, that are working that through the process, and they haven't charged us anything for it. It's being funded and fundraised, and that is a very strong significance, and I think they all want to be a part of this historical thing. So it has already been at the appeal stage, and I can just tell you from watching it, from watching the body language of the three justices, we're going to win this one. Okay, and it'll probably go to the Supreme Court, I'm sure of that. But yeah, that doesn't cost us. Oh yeah, there are quite a few lawyers that are working together on that. So that's the judicial review channel, and now we're on the other channel, which is the civil suit. So we are now suing in the personal capacity all of these people. Because if we don't have accountability, right, we've got nothing. We've got to put those gag rails back on to keep society straight. Yeah?
So now that Justin Trudeau is not the Prime Minister anymore, does it mean that taxpayers still pay for his defense?
Well, they never would have, because we're not going after the Prime Minister. We're going after Justin Trudeau in personal capacity. Yeah.
So, has his personal lawyer responded to any of your, like, anywhere in this process?
So what's happened is we don't get deep into the minutiae and detail with our legal team, like, hey, tell us how all the conversations went, because at $500 or $600 an hour, I don't need to know. But what they did say back in June, I believe, of last year, is that everybody has been served. And I know that as time has gone on, they have said, yes, different counsel has reached out to us, want to know, how are things going to proceed. And because this appeal, this Mosley appeal is coming up, they just said, can we just freeze things until that appeal is decided, and then we'll start it up again. So right now they've frozen things for a little bit of time.
So you're pretty sure you're going to win. We know that the federal government is going to appeal this and go to the Supreme Court. They won't.
Right.
Like Mark Carney will.
Right, so without getting into it, and there are complexities, it's kind of like an engine in your car. It's complicated, and there's a lot of pieces, right? So likewise with this, it's complicated, and there's a lot of pieces. So we're at the point where we're saying, hey, you know, let's talk to the public, let's let them know what's going on, and let's get funding support so that we can push far and wide.
How about going on US podcasts and getting them?
Yeah, I'd love to.
I know Joe Rogan, they'll fundraise to you, but a lot of Americans contribute.
Right, sure. You call Joe Rogan and I'm on it. For sure. Tucker Carlson.
Make the rounds.
Yeah, yeah. So we are trying to do that for sure. For sure. Anybody else here with a question? Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about
That's Michael Alexander, my friend.
And I didn't know much about the civil suit, and are you suing for damages, I assume, or is it negligence or misuse of public office? What kind of claim are you?
All of it. It's huge. I'll email you a copy of the statement of claim. It's all detailed in there.